Okay. Well, I think we can start. Welcome everybody to the first research track workshop by Sam. Thank you, Sam, for being here and giving us this workshop. I'm really curious who of you have attended previous meetings of the research track. I already saw Viswik, for example, but I'm sure there are more. Rob is also here. Can you throw up some hearts if you're already familiar with the research track? Oh yeah, I recognize you also, Lida. Cool. It's nice to see you guys all here to attend Sam's workshop. So let me briefly tell you something about the research track, and then we can go on to the workshop. So the research track meets every other week to have an open discussion about basically anything research related, which the main goal is to share, help each other out, and inspire each other. So if you are interested in anything like that, you can join us next meeting, which will be on the 5th of May at 8 p.m. CET, so Central European Time. You can always look for that event in the events calendar on Allspace. So I hope you guys will enjoy the workshop and maybe see you later on other meetings we have. And Sam, the stage is yours. Good luck. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, everyone. Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Reno. It's a pleasure to see everybody virtually. That is my information up there on the screen. That top right, let me use a little laser pointer thing. That is, that's my avatar in Altspace. Apparently I made that whenever I had a beard, but then whenever I had that photograph there taken, I was clean shaven. I usually smile more than that, but corporate photos. My name is Sam Reno. I am a PhD candidate at Drake University, which is in the central United States. And I am, as a candidate, I am preparing my dissertation proposal. I have not yet proposed my dissertation. I'm preparing it. And I'm also a full-time professional in management at a large gas and electric utility company. And so as a part of preparing my dissertation proposal, there's 3 chapters. The first is the introduction, the second is the comprehensive literature review, and the third is your methodologies, the methodologies that are going to, you intend to be a part of your research. And so that is the basis for a lot of the conversation today. Philosophical views of mixed reality technologies. I'm going to, we're going to talk about VR, virtual reality. We're talking about AR, augmented reality. When I talk about those together, I'll either call it mixed reality or XR. And so this is the agenda I have. We had a 5-minute welcome period here, and then I'm trying to stay on track for 20 minutes of conversation. And then we'll have a brief Q&A period. I want to try and keep that brief so that we can keep some energy and go into breakout sessions for 15 minutes and have conversations about how your research, either you have in mind now or maybe new ideas for research, how does that create knowledge? How does that research create change? There are so many varied, powerful applications of VR and AR. I hope that considering the knowledge that we create through our research through 4 philosophical worldviews will help spark some ideas and create some self-recognition of what it is that we are trying to create through our research. And so that is the agenda. And so if you're familiar with research methodologies, you're probably familiar with these 2 texts. These will be the source material for most of the conversations that I have about worldviews. Here on the left, the book on the left there by Creswell. Creswell is a prolific author about research design methods. And on the right there, that purple book by Michael Crotty, I think that would be considered a landmark book, compiling philosophical views related to social research. So these will be the 2 texts that I mainly draw from. And this slide is going to be kind of an end slide. When you see this in 20 minutes, this will be where we are going to stop and have a QA, right? There are four philosophical worldviews that we're going to talk about today. And these are what Creswell identifies as the most widely held philosophical worldviews of researchers. There's post-positivism, which is this objective view of the world. There are causes and effects. We can use the scientific method to determine what is reality. There's constructivism, where this belief that it is humans who create knowledge as they interpret the world around them. And then there's these other bottom and the bottom left and the bottom right. It's a view of a philosophical worldview that your research is intended to change society, especially on behalf of typically oppressed social populations. And then the pragmatic view that truth comes from identifying practical value. And so we're going to talk about those four philosophical worldviews. Creswell here, he establishes that a worldview is a set of beliefs. And I think, if there's a risk, I guess I'd say, in the information that I'm presenting today, it's to almost articulate philosophical worldviews as like a menu at McDonald's. You could say, well, I want an extra large side of pragmatism. And it's, I think that what you're actually reflecting upon as you think about what is your view of the knowledge that is created through your research, it is to self-reflect on your own beliefs about how is it that you believe knowledge is created and how does that influence your research. Creswell, he says it, researchers should make explicit. They should explain, make it clear to the readers of their studies, to their audience, what is the philosophical beliefs that they hold, so that the author can more effectively evaluate the positionality of your research. Okay, so I said I work at an electric utility company, a large gas and electric utility company, and my profession is human performance improvement. Human performance improvement are the techniques to reduce human error in our work. In electric utility work, errors can be deadly. People can get electrocuted. Line workers can get electrocuted. But more commonly, there are just inconvenient problems, such as disconnecting electricity to your home when you were not wanting that, because somebody made a boo-boo, because we made an error. And so this right here, we're looking at this brick side of a building. This is the side of an apartment complex. And there's different units in that apartment complex where people live, and every one of those round things here, they are an electric meter that provides the electricity to each individual flat in the apartment. And sometimes people want the electricity turned off temporarily. Maybe they're going to remodel the kitchen, and so they want the electricity turned off so they can safely remodel the kitchen. And an electric worker, it's in a truck, they have a work instruction, maybe sent to a computer terminal in their truck that says, go disconnect the electricity for apartment 3B, right? And we want that electric worker, when they show up, to select the right electric meter to turn off. If the electric worker is coming out to disconnect the electricity to your neighbor, you want the electric worker to make the right choice and not accidentally walk up and pull up the electric meter for your flat and maybe disconnect your experience in VR right now. So there's an application of AR. Let's see if I missed my slide there. There's an application of AR that can provide an objective view of reality. There is one view of the right electric meter to pull, and this is a technology that we're working very similar to something like this with a company called Index AR Solutions to provide on smartphones an augmented reality lens through which to make the right decisions about how to properly disconnect electric meters, how to properly build electric meters. And so whenever I started interacting with concepts of philosophical concepts as a part of my reading and research for my dissertation, and then also thinking about the types of errors that I am trying to prevent in the work that we do. I mean, I thought AR, it is this objective, gives me the ability to give this objective view of reality to somebody such as a line worker. And so this is how Creswell defines the philosophical view of post-positivism. Reality exists out there in the world. We just have to objectively determine it. Causes lead to effects. That's the knowledge that we're trying to create, is what are the causes leading to what effects. Just briefly, I'll touch on the word post-positivism. Over hundreds of years, philosophers have kicked back and forth. They've evolved philosophical understandings, and they used to think, well, we're positive that this is the effect. Well, then through evolutionary discussions about philosophy, they said, well, we are almost sure. There's not a law of gravity, there's a theory of gravity. You can never be completely sure. And so post-positivism, that is the term that Creswell uses for this objectivist philosophical view, that there's an objective view of reality, and as researchers, what we're trying to do is we're trying to observe and measure that. And so for the various companies that I've referenced, I'm putting up their website. But this is an application similar to what we're developing with Index AR. That is looking through a iPad to look at the health status, I guess you could say, of a substation transformer. Maybe show us what the temperature is of the oil, or how much current is going through the transformer at a time. So now let's talk about another worldview, constructivism. Crotty uses the word constructionism. I'm going to reference constructivism, but it's the belief that meaning comes into existence as humans interact with your world. And so an application of VR, I'm going to show you in the next slide. There's going to be a movie that plays. It's a VR 360-degree short clip that we created in collaboration with a company, a technology vendor, Applied Art and Technology. And what it is it's in the utility industry, often engineers are college professionals or college-educated professionals who sit at a desk and design instructions on how to build utility systems, like how to build electric poles or how to build gas pipelines. And then utility workers are skilled, highly trained people who work out in the field, in the sun and the cold and the wind, and they try to build those systems per the instructions of the engineers. But engineers can make mistakes in their designs. They can make calculation errors. They can make errors like that. Field workers can make mistakes when they build things. I think it's not uncommon at my company, but we often have a knowledge mismatch between engineers and field workers. They don't have the same view of reality, and then that can, I think, lead sometimes to animosity, and I think it can certainly sometimes lead to errors due to misunderstandings. And so one application of VR that we used was to collaborate with utility workers to make VR 360 movies of work being performed, in some cases where engineers can't go, such as in the case of that video, 20 meters up in the air, where line workers are qualified to work, but engineers do not. And here's another video. This was at I call it the lab at Applied Art and Technology. This is a video of a gas pipeline construction job. But so it was not just, the goal was not just that we give the engineers an immersive experience in virtual reality to see firsthand the output in real life of the things that they design on computers, right? That was not the only goal. The goal included was, and I didn't really realize this at the time, but I realize now it drove my desire for this application, was this belief that I have that humans coming together create shared mindsets, they create knowledge as they interpret their world, as they collaborate in interpretation of their world. And so the application of this wasn't just giving this engineer, we did this several times, but this is a classroom, and it's at each table were groups of a few engineers and a few utility workers sitting together in small groups, having micro learning discussions. And one at a time, an engineer would come to the front of the class and he'd put on the VR headset and he would experience that immersiveness of looking around at this type of work, while out at the tables, the engineers and the utility workers discussed what it was that they were seeing, talking about experiences that they've had in their life. They created knowledge. To me, I believe this was, I believe that we will improve human performance if we can come together and create shared mindsets. That is what I was trying to accomplish with this VR application. And I guess I'll just kind of point out in this video right here, this guy here is an electric line worker, highly skilled, highly trained. He's that yellow thing, that's a rubber sleeves they wear whenever they're up in the air. And the folks at Applied Art and Technology that they did is they mounted some VR cameras in various places, including, you can't really see that, but that's an aerial bucket. It's like a bucket mounted on a truck that flies up in the air. So that is an application of VR that I think is assisting create construction of knowledge. Now I'm going to show you a little bit of a different application of VR. I don't have videos, these are just screenshots, but worked with a company out of Calgary, 3D Internet, to use VR as a tool to teach drivers to observe threats in their environment that could cause vehicle wrecks. And in this particular case, you can see we did it on a smartphone. You could pan around with your smartphone and be trained on how to observe threats in the environment. So that was a sort of I think more of a post-positivist and objectivist sort of philosophical application of VR. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a third worldview, the transformative worldview. This is what Creswell says is when you're doing research with an agenda to change society, you have a political or social agenda to change society through your research. And the next video, this is going to play a video. It's a little bit dark, but just hang on, it'll start playing. You maybe have seen this. This is the documentary Traveling While Black, and it is a documentary that immerses audiences in the struggles that minorities in the United States had being able to have freedom of movement across the country before civil rights. And whenever I experienced this VR, I was thinking about like what kind of knowledge is being created here. Well, in fact, I was even questioning what did the producers intend to transform society through by creating empathy among the audience for this plight. And so you can see in this case, when you put on the VR headset, you're sitting there experiencing, immersed in this experience of the recreation of traveling while a Black person in the United States in the 1950s and 60s. And so I contemplated what kind of knowledge, was that the intent of the producers to transform my mind and transform the mind of other people. And then, so I'm going to show you another video here. And this is not a company that I've collaborated with, but I think that they apply VR in a way that is explicit in how they want to transform society, to use VR as an empathy machine. Story Up. And I'm going to show a video here. This is a little mashup video from their website. This will autoplay. But this is, explicit. They need our help, right? And then it goes through this virtually immersive connection, trying to transform minds, trying to improve society through this application of VR. Now I'm going to show a slide here, and the next slide is going to reference research from Stanford's VR human factors lab. And this actually goes back to a 2011 study. And I think that this is transformative. It just conveys a transformative power of VR. And a lot of folks probably have heard about this study. I got a little screenshot of it down here on the right, that for research participants to cut down trees using a chainsaw in virtual reality, after taking off the headset, they tended to use fewer paper towels to clean up a spill. The use of VR in this application transformed the participants to a more conservative, recycling type of conservative mindset. As the researcher said, we found that virtual reality can be used to change how people behave. I think you could say virtual reality can be used to change what people believe. And so I'm going to talk about one more type of worldview, and I'm going to talk about pragmatism. And Creswell, he says, truth is what works at the time. In fact, I'd almost say it's almost like it is a philosophical worldview about values, but almost without values to guide it. It's and I got a couple slides on this, and I'll show you. Like, as a part of my comprehensive literature review for my dissertation proposal, I've been reading through the various studies. And the thing on the left here, this red and gray, that's the cover of the published proceedings of the 2019 conference of VR, AR, and XR. And as I go through and I read those studies, I think I see a lot of a pragmatic approach, a pragmatic mindset in a lot of the research that people do. We are trying to solve a problem, and Crotty describes pragmatism as researchers who use all approaches. I'm going to maybe do an objective study of reality, measure for cause and effect, and maybe I'm going to build some shared mindsets through qualitative research methods. But the standard for truth is, what is the most practical application? And I like that last quote from Crotty. This philosophy is quintessentially an American philosophy. That's not, I would say, exclusive, but I am, I'm not saying this for better or for worse, but I'm in the United States. I'm a white male, college educated, in a good profession. I think it's hard for me to not imagine the world as problems that I have resources and ideas to solve. And so I'm going to tell you a bit about my research plans, and I think maybe ask you to co-evaluate whether you think that, honestly, at the core of my beliefs is this: it's hard to shake this pragmatic view of knowledge creation. So my intended research was to build upon a study in 2004, printed in the journal Management Science. And the name of the study is Effects of Adaptive Behaviors on Shared Mental Models and Control Room Performance. So my intended research was to identify the most effective problem-solving behaviors for operators who work in a control room, working with computer terminals that show alarms and status and indications about the electric system across the territory, as they communicate with field workers who are directly working physically hands-on. And this was my intended study. And this is a picture right up here at the top. That would be a sort of a typical control room. You got control room operators sitting at their desks, monitoring a variety of computer terminals about the status and alarms and things across the electrical system. And then you got down here, you have the people that will be talking to in the field, collaboratively solving a mutual problem where they have a separate view of the world. And so actually my intent has been to use the game Keep Talking, which if you're not familiar with it, Somebody in a VR headset works to solve a make-believe bomb with a bunch of little puzzles on it, and they collaborate verbally with other people who got the instructions to solve the make-believe bomb. And so my research plan had been to use this as an analog to study effective problem-solving communication behaviors between people who work in a control room and have one view, and people who are in field and have another view. A problem I have right now is people are not currently getting together in groups like this. And so I'm having to rethink how I am going to perform that research. But I think it comes into this Q&A question. I think it's for me, even though I believe that VR is great for doing this, and even though I think AR is great for this, showing this objective view of the world that can be used to improve human performance, I think what I just said was pragmatic. I am trying to solve a problem. I'm trying to improve human performance. And I guess my last point, before I'll go into QA, is that I think this is an amazing moment for practitioners in my field. Traditional techniques of human performance improvement have been to write more procedures, to retrain the worker, to dangle out the threat of disciplinary punishment if you don't perform better. I think VR and AR opens up amazing new applications to help humans perform in the field through that AR application, through those VR applications. And so I'm excited to try to harness these different technologies to improve human performance. I think that's pragmatism. And so, Keith, I don't know if you would want to help me kind of moderate questions, but I think we could take questions for 5 minutes or so, or questions or comments people have.
I'm not sure if he's able to, because he told me he has some problems with the hosting panel. So
okay.
I can take that over. So I don't know if you guys know how that works, how to ask questions during these sessions, but if you look at your bottom right, you see the raise hand button. So if you have any questions, please click on that button and I can give you a megaphone and you can ask some questions. So the first question is of Camperman. Here you go. Keith?
Thanks, Evelyn. Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry I don't have the mod rights to help you with the questions, but Evelyn will do that. But I do have a question, or more a bit of an observation, actually. Thanks so far for what you've just delivered there. I think we probably all agree that was really informative. I'm really interested in the bit that you've talked about in terms of how workers interpret their world. I worked initially when I first started after graduation in a paper factory, and one of the things I noticed, I was in marketing and international sales, and one of the things I noticed that the language I spoke was a completely different language to what they spoke on the shop floor in the factory. So some of the things that I was doing, it wasn't really translating into their language. And there's always been, for anybody in the room that understands industrial cells or industrial units, there's always been this rift between production and sales. And I think that's very similar to what you've described there, between people in a control room communicating with people out in the field. It's kind of like the people in the field are like, do these guys even know what we have to deal with? And equally, the guys in the control room are kind of like, do these guys even know what they're doing? There's this massive communication barrier. So what you've described there in terms of augmented reality being used as a tool to facilitate this improved communication, or as you said here, to allow people to interpret their world better, I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I think that any research in that area is absolutely vital if we in the future, especially with the way that the world is changing, if we expect to adapt and to work in better ways in collaboration with people, especially remotely, which is what we're facing right now. So I just wanted to say thank you first of all and to share that view with you.
One of the things that Keith, that you did make me think of is whenever so often when you talk about you're into VR, right? If you say, well, I do research related to VR, what do people say? They're like, oh, you mean like gaming, right? And so, it's like there's so many powerful applications. And then a lot of times if you're talking to novices about VR and AR, they don't have a recognition of one is different than the other. Or why would you choose one for one reason or another? For me, it has been instructive, especially to think of the objective view of reality versus this, are we just trying to upload into the worker the software for them to know how to make the right decisions? Or are we trying to equip them with the ability to interpret a world full of randomness so they can make the right decision in the moment? And so I think that it's a lot more than video games.
Thanks for your question. Next question is from David. David Grip, you are on. You have to unmute yourself though.
Hi.
Hey.
I work in transportation safety, teaching defensive driving courses. Do you feel VR, if I were to implement it in the classes, would help facilitate interaction over just going in the truck with the driver one-on-one as a group? If keeping a group of drivers in a room, do you feel that's more beneficial?
Okay, well, the easy answer I'd say is yes, I think definitely. But there's, whenever we were doing that activity, that Applied Art and Technology helped us develop, where we made the 360-degree VR movies. I thought that the most important learning outcomes were these micro conversations where people were just talking about things that I could not have designed a training course that would have had the granularity of knowledge and concerns that they were forming as they talked to each other. So I'm intrigued by the transportation safety topic. I think especially if you have different, people from different work groups, perhaps like material handlers and loaders who load trucks, perhaps fuel, people who provide fuel for trucks, perhaps maybe people who perform dispatching or provide work, delivery instructions for trucks, and the drivers. I am confident that a VR application like what I showed will create knowledge, and I would be shocked if it would not improve safe behaviors through more shared mindsets, a more understanding of the needs of the people that you collaborate with.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you for your question. Do you have time for another question?
Yes, yeah, that'd be fine. I think
Okay.
I do think, Evelyn, I think I'll allow you to say how we should do this, but I do think on the next slide I have this. This is the next slide we'll go to for 15-minute breakout discussions for folks just to get into small groups and have a conversation about these questions. But if you'd like to, you could take more questions if people have them.
Yes, let's do one other question from Rick.
Yes, hi. Really appreciate your talk today. Very interesting. I guess I wonder, in your grid with the 4 quadrants, do you end up in one of those quadrants based on the problem you're trying to solve versus starting in a quadrant to solve the problem? So for instance, in the one example you gave of, was it Black in America? Didn't they end up in a transformative quadrant perhaps because of the output versus starting with that philosophy?
Okay, I think your question is great. I think your question is a question that should be asked. I would not, I am only an egg as philosophers go. If there are professional philosophers in the room, I would be encouraged to hear some of your thoughts maybe when we come back together after the break.
I would not be one, by the way.
but I would, okay, I appreciate that. But I would say that a concept of reflective upon the, I think I struggle with the concept, or I struggle to effectively, I think of philosophy as like, these are like tools in my toolbox, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not really what this is about. This is not about this is about what are reflect upon your own beliefs. How do you believe? How do you interpret what is true in the world? And so I don't really even think that these are like apples and oranges and four other types of fruits. I think one of these is like an automobile, and one of these is love, and one of these is time, and these unrelated things. It's just this question of how do you, through your journey as an adult, maybe gathering life experiences, but also with some innate, innate points of view in the world, how do you believe knowledge is created? I mean, to be Marxism, right? Marxism, that is a transformative philosophical view. If I understand Marxism correctly, it is a belief that always the working class must be trying to shatter the status quo, because it is ever present that there will be people who try to, take control of the resources and power. And so I'm not advocating for that, but I'm just saying that is a view of the world. Another transformative worldview is queer theory, is feminism. It's this belief that the way that you create meaning is by perpetually struggling, right? I don't think that, philosophically, it's not like I'm going to, because I'm a pragmatist, apparently, I look at it that way, but I think philosophically, it's what are your core beliefs of how knowledge and meaning is created in the world.
Thank you for that.
Awesome, thank you for your questions. I think it's good to now go on with the next part of your presentation.
So I guess right now, I encourage you to take 15 minutes. In 15 minutes, Evelyn and I will kind of come around and try and wrap you up and bring you back in here for a recap. But for right now, I hope that you will get together in small groups. You might want to have some distance away from different groups so you don't get audio crosstalk in your ears, but just have a conversation about like, what research ideas do you have? What research ideas, maybe new ideas that you have about applications of VR and AR. Maybe if you've self-reflected on some of your own research projects to try to identify what do you think is the philosophical view that you think is driving your research.
Wait, can I customize my character so I can like?
Oh.
Okay.
So
with this time, I guess take 15 minutes and make some friends and have conversations about the knowledge that you're trying to create with research.
So this map is pretty
Hey
large,
guys,
so you can all go outside
back
also.
here in this corner?
Yes, you can
go
all unmute
outside,
yourself also.
Right.
Yep.
Sam, don't forget to turn
you are-
yourself off megaphone.
Kyle?
Did you ask a question about the research, the quadrant?
Yes.
Oh,
So who would share a highlight of one of your discussions, something meaningful that you learned?
Okay, let's use the raise hand button again so I can put you all on megaphone. So raise your hand if you want to share anything, and I can give you the megaphone. The raise hand button is on the bottom right. Keith, there you go.
Oh, it's me again.
Yeah.
Me again. Sam, apologies because I forget the terminology. I'm nowhere near as strong. Here we go. Brilliant. Yes. So myself and Lida, we've talked a couple of times. But Lida, forgive me for stealing your thunder here. And I'm not going to share everything that Lida's working on, but she's working in culture, and she's trying to bring culture to the masses through using VR, AR, and XR. And she's having difficulties. And as we were just discussing then, one of the main difficulties is making it real, because if you imagine going to a heritage site in VR and then having the ability of jumping back, say, 500 years prior. So I'm going to click here and go 500 years prior. What did this look like? Then you need some really good advanced models. So we were discussing that. But what I wanted to say about that conversation was this, that you're making, again, this really links into the constructivism and the transformative approach, because if we can really make people feel how things were or would be, let's say in another 100 years time, because we can move in models I think that's what you were trying to say, leader. Forgive me if I'm wrong. You can jump in at any minute. But I do think that really works on both of those philosophies, Sam. So that was what we were discussing, and I think that the work that leaders doing in that area is or could be quite profound. So yeah.
One of the authors that I cited, Michael Crotty, that was the Purple Book. He says a few different times that constructivists, or some people sometimes think they are constructivists when really it is something else. And I think, I think that it could be that transformative. It's like, I'm not just trying to create knowledge with this research. I am trying to make the world a better place, which that starts to sound transformative, you know?
Yeah, I think there's an element of both, definitely. Yeah. But leader, feel free to jump in with that. I'm going to put the microphone down.
I don't know. I mean, my thoughts about all this are very practical and they're not very philosophical, to be honest. They have to do with solving actual problems, with how to make this thing, and I don't go much beyond that. Probably I'm in your little number 4 box, to be honest. If you have to put me somewhere in a little box, solve the problem.
Yes, it's hard. It's hard for me to not think of the world in that way, of these, problems to solve. I'm intrigued by your research, by the way. If I understood correctly, using virtual reality to immersively teleport people to a different moment in time in that same space.
Yes, yes, but that's not only a part of it. It's just getting, let's say, a location, of historical importance, and view it in different parts of its history, and actually being able to interact with it also. I don't know if that's clear.
One of the things that your work makes me think of is, in some cases in the United States, I don't know if this happens globally, but in some cases in the United States, presenters will start with a global positioning statement that, such as in my case, I'm standing in the United States on land that 250 years ago was occupied by the Sac and Fox tribes of the Sioux Nation. And a part of like a culturally positioning statement such as that is to, I think probably to give respect to the place from where, your privilege to be here came from. But I almost think through your research or your work, I mean, his ability to provide that, I think, that transformative effect. It's not a culturally positioning statement. It's to give you a culturally positioning experience. Fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, a cultural location, let's say an ancient Greek temple, had many uses in its history. In medieval times, it could have been a church. In another time, it could have been a warehouse. It has happened. I mean, there have been places of historical importance that changed many uses from the, very important religious site to just a warehouse. You understand what I mean? And just explore that. And being able to switch between that and see how it changed. And also even interact with the people that were there. Not the actual people, of course, but representations of these people. NPCs that you have in games. But, being able to talk to these people in a way. I don't know if I'm clear, anybody. I mean, yes. So that's about it. I mean, there are far more things and far more stuff to do with these ideas I have, but this is one of the main parts of it, yes.
mean, your work makes me think of if you had the ability to take voters in the United States to use VR to give them a view of 200 years in the future. If we do not try to combat climate change, how would that change? How would that transform people's political agenda if they could, if you had the ability to show them 300 experience, be immersed in what 200 years in the future looks like without climate change?
Okay, to be
aggressive climate
honest,
change
this
policy.
is something that goes beyond me because I have a very specific idea of history, which is you can see things to the past. I mean, the future is a bit weird, so I wouldn't go that far personally. But that's my
Okay,
own
shall we
idea
take
of
on
the
another
world.
question or suggestion or anything like that?
I had a question.
So Fiswick, you are on megaphone. If you have a question, please click the raise hand button because then I can give you megaphone.
Hi, Sam. Hello. So one of my thoughts when I was thinking about these four different kind of philosophical approaches that you've kind of presented to us is I was trying to, like everyone probably in the audience, like, oh, which one of these do I fit into? And then it kind of felt like, I feel like I fit into all of these at different times, depending on which day of the week it is and which project I happen to be working on today and which mood I'm in and which, you know what I mean? Like I got trained as an experimental psychologist. So the cause and effect is hard for me to turn off because I was trained to do cause and effect experimental work. But then as my career's evolved, in psychology, this idea of changing society and trying to do good for society comes out in some of the research that I'm doing. And then some of my problems are often like, when they're course related, they're often very practical. They're like, I just got to solve the problem so that the course can move forward, or I can fix this thing so that we can move forward with this project. So it just feels like this is really dynamic. Like, I don't think necessarily need to lock ourselves into, I come at it from this approach or you come in it from that. Like, that maybe this is just a dynamic process and these are all just ways of approaching any given problem in any given moment.
I like to think of it that way. I am waiting someday for a esteemed epistemologist, that's a great word, epistemologist.
Yep.
I'm waiting for an esteemed epistemologist to tell me I'm thinking of it wrong. But what you described is how I think of it. Crotty did say in his book, he said, if you're using social constructivist research to create objective results,
Right.
you're not a social constructivist. You're a
Right.
pragmatist.
Right.
Yeah. Good question.
Well,
Comment. Good comment.
Okay, nice. One question, the last question of Kyle. There you go.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so my question was about how do you, this might be getting more into your methodology, but how do you measure the extent to which you've achieved your goal? Like, let's say you're in pragmatism, right? So do you, what are the ways that you can show that the operators in the field and the control station are actually working better with each other?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. Actually, the question, Biswig asked us another question. My research method, I plan, is a quantitative approach. I plan to gather on a 10-point Likert scale participant after they perform a game, for them to, on a 10-point Likert scale, to measure the confidence in which they believe they were giving the right information. And a 10-point Likert scale for them to measure the frustration they felt. I'm going to have control groups where, following up on that 2004 study, I mentioned control groups where one group uses pre-job communication planning as identified in this study, and one group or some groups do not. And then I'm going to be able to figure out what was the average time it took to solve the bomb? Or how many times did the bomb blow up for the groups that did this and didn't do this? You could certainly do interesting qualitative analysis. You could ask people like narrative, you could do narrative inquiry, you know, but I think my research plan is to grab that quantitative data of confidence and communication, frustration with the experience, and then average time to solve the bomb, did the bomb blow up, based upon these established behaviors for some groups will do these pre-job brief behaviors, some groups will just be thrown into the exercise without that pre-job brief. That's the game plan. And Biswig, would you mind providing the other comment that you had about expertise?
Sure. Can everybody hear me? Do I need to be megaphoned? We're okay. So I was just saying when Sam and I were talking at the break there, I was just mentioning that one of the things that we found in expertise, thank you, megaphone. One of the things that we find in psychology, one of the patterns that you see in expertise fairly commonly across all different types of expertise is that experts have a tendency to spend less time doing a task because they spend a little bit more time, a little bit more of the proportion of time figuring out how to do the task better. So at first it almost looks like they're slower because they're spending more time, like somebody is inexperienced might have jumped right into the task and you're like, oh, why isn't this person getting the task done? By the time they get to the end, they often finish earlier because it didn't take them that long to do the task. They pre-anticipated a lot of the problems that they might bump into and then fixed them before they got to those problems. So they developed a better plan in the first place. And that's a common pattern in expertise. And it'll be interesting to see if that's the kind of pattern that you're looking for, Sam, in the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you guys all for your input, and mostly thank you, Sam, for this amazing workshop. Let's give Sam some hearts and some applause to show our appreciation. You did a great job. It was super interesting, if you ask me. Awesome. So if you guys thought it was an interesting workshop, consider joining the Research Open Discussion events too. And next to that, we plan to organize other workshops as well. Maybe Sam will give another workshop. Who knows? You are more than welcome to do so. Also, join the Discord to stay in touch with us. You can find the Discord on the Educators in VR website. So if you Google Educators in VR, you will find the website immediately. Next to that, we also launched a new campaign to support researchers during the corona pandemic. For example, by giving them a medium to gather some data, for them to give us the links to their surveys or ask for help. So that is really cool. So I really hope to see you guys again. Sam, thank you so much for this workshop. And if you want to speak to Sam, stay around for a little bit, if you are free, obviously. Thanks.
Yes, I am. Thank you, everybody.
Have a nice day.